do welcome you with all of my heart, because I'm very honored to have your presence here and to offer these free community workshops on a love revolution. And it makes me feel really happy that we can be here together and have such important conversations about self-growth and about intimacy and just, living lives that are very heart-centered. So thank you for being here. And I would love for you to use this. Hello, Kaylee. I would love for you to use this chat on the side here, introducing yourself, telling us where you're from, maybe sharing any questions you might have or comments you might have. But more specifically, we also have an Ask a Question button, and you'll see it down there next to the people who are signed in here. And so I encourage lots of questions and lots of comments and lots of interacting. And I'll also keep with the flow. And because we have a limited time here, try to keep that going, but also get to all of the juicy questions that you might have about Tantra and intimacy. So when we talk about Tantra, I know so many people have such different ideas about what Tantra even is, particularly in the West. And specifically, it's important to know that when we speak about Tantra, we are speaking about a yogic science. It is a science that is rooted in yoga. It's a metaphysical science. We're also speaking, when we speak about yoga, about meditation, because yoga is a form of meditation. It's not what it's really been marketed and sold as in the US, which is a fitness routine. That's a great byproduct of yoga, of course. But we really are speaking about putting ourselves in a meditative space, whether we're doing a Kriya Yoga, which is a more active kind of moving meditation, or if we're doing an asana, which are the postures and what people traditionally think of when they think of yoga. We are putting ourselves into a different position. We're putting ourselves into a heightened state, and we're literally changing our perspective, right? We're changing how we see the world quite literally through postures. And so Tantra is a result of having a specific lifestyle, and this lifestyle is one of seeking deep intimacy. And that deep intimacy really is a recognition that we are all expressions of love. And we look through this process of Tantra. Tantra is really a result of a process and a path of looking at all of the ways that we seek love and all of the ways that we resist love. And this is a basis of understanding our purpose, or what we call our dharma, our divine purpose. And so the path of Tantra is one of understanding and accepting the deep truths about how we approach love without judgment. So there's your class. I'm just kidding. If only it was that simple, right? And there's so many more questions around that, I understand. So we look at the world without judgment. We look at love without judgment. What does that mean? It's not that simple, right? Because judgments and conditionings and beliefs are really put upon us, and they blind us from our ability to see love. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are, the stories we tell ourselves about reality, all of these things limit our ability to see ourselves as these infinite creators of love. They limit us from seeing and understanding the infinite nature of this universe. And so we remove these infinite possibilities with some of these blocks that we have to love. We limit ourselves from the knowledge and the expression of our free will. And so Tantra is really a lifestyle of freeing ourselves from these external conditionings, these prisons that we put ourselves in that limit us from realizing our fullest expressions of ourself, which is our unique expression of love. And our ego is a wonderful part of that, of course, right? We talk about the ego a lot. The ego really keeps us trapped inside of this idea that we are either better than someone or that we are not as good as someone, right? You ever had that kind of spiral of thinking where you are literally comparing yourself and putting yourself above others, or you're putting yourself below others? And our ego loves to do that because our ego loves to protect us. And so based on a lot of these conditionings, our ego thinks it's protecting us, but it's a lie, because in the eyes of Tantra, the eyes of God, the eyes of the universe, whatever you'd like to call it, there is no such thing as this idea of being better than or being less than, right? This is how our ego keeps us safe, and it destroys our innocence, and it destroys our freedom and our ability to give and to receive love freely, because we are all equal. We are all divine. We are all special. We are all unique. And at the same time, none of us are special and none of us are better than. And so in Tantra, we try to, and in most spiritual practices, really, there is an element typically of reaching a balance where you don't feel this pull, but you feel very merged with everyone and everything. And the polarity of being a human being removes us from that, our egos remove us from that, and our spiritual practice brings us back into alignment. So Tantra has been widely misunderstood as a lifestyle, as a metaphysical science, and as an overall idea in Western society. So I'm hoping that this workshop today will help give you some clarity on Tantra and on intimacy and on how to begin or continue, if you're already on this path, a journey into really recognizing the power of love. Tantra is a Vedic philosophy, and the Vedas are like the oldest spiritual text known to man, precedes Christianity, Judaism, Islam by thousands of years. And it is in these ancient texts where a lot of this knowledge is shared. And it doesn't segregate by race or nationality. You can be a student of the Veda and also a Christian. You can be a tantric and also be a Jew. But Veda is for all Tantra and all tantrics who wish to practice. And there's a purity to these teachings that is often bypassed because of the kind of sexualized, I would say, principles that have been added to Tantra. And when we look at the purity of Tantra, and we'll talk about this too, if you guys have questions, please type them, but Tantra has many different approaches to the spiritual path in the East, specifically in India. And there are many, many forms of Tantra. And I'd love to share my screen with you guys right now, just to kind of take you through a little presentation that I put together. So let me see how I can do that. Tantra is a metaphysical and yogic science. Tantra is an ancient philosophy and a spiritual psychology. Tantra, as I mentioned, is a result of a path. It's not an intellectual pursuit. So in order to know Tantra, you have to actually have an experience through Tantra. And Tantra is also a lifestyle. Ayurveda is the nutritional and kind of elemental way of merging our bodies with nature, which is a very important element of Tantra. And Tantra encourages sexual awareness as a key for self-healing and awareness and evolution and expressing love, divinity, union, and even prayer and worship, as you may know. And so there are various schools of Tantra. Many are rooted in India in the East. The Vedic knowledge through Kashmir Shaivism, we see it in left-handed and right-handed Tantra, Kundalini to name a few. And then in China, we see Taoist Tantra, which really focuses on Qigong and Chinese medicinal approaches. We also have Tibetan Buddhism, which has its own various schools in itself. And then I want to talk to you guys about Neo-Tantra. And I'm just going to hide this for a second. Neo-Tantra is really what you'll probably have been the most familiar with in some of your understandings, right? So we see like this bohemian girl in lingerie on Instagram, and so she says she's teaching Tantra. And I don't want to judge, and it's very possible and probable that she's teaching things that are valuable, and that she's teaching some type of conscious relating, some type of sexuality practices, some type of anatomy or orgasmic practices. But this isn't Tantra unless she's really citing sources and using Vedic teachings and technologies in her work. She's likely practicing what I call Neo-Tantra, which is widely based on modern psychology, and it can be very useful. I use Neo-Tantric practices in my own methods, but it's not going to always go deeper. And it's not going to go into depths of healing and purification and the way that traditional practices do. And you can actually even become more traumatized, more wounded, more attached to your karma, more attached to your ego, more wounded. I've even seen people go into psychosis if their practice is not held in a safe and gentle space. And so a lot of times when we hear about Tantra, or we hear about these schools of thought that were damaging to students, or there was some sort of perversion going on in the school or power dynamics going on, it's often because the purity of the practices weren't being upheld safely, and that there was some sort of whatever happening with that leader. This is what most Westerners have been exposed to in terms of Tantra. I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but the education and the background of the practitioner, the intention of the practitioner is very crucial in the work. So if you are exploring Tantra and looking to move further in your exploration, please choose someone who's devoted and heart-centered and creating sacred agreements and holding safe space, and who's also triggering you to go deeper than the surface of sexuality. Because if someone is teaching you sexual practices without also working on darkness, shadow, emotional work, they are not exploring Tantra. They are exploring simply sexuality. So respect is very tied to intimacy, right? And I was just reading a book called Kindle My Heart by Guru Mai, and I really recommend it. And she really talks about how respect is very closely tied to intimacy and love. And intimacy and love are our basic foundations of happiness, right? So all of these things that we wish to have present in our lives really can't bloom if respect isn't on the table and isn't deeply cultivated in ourselves, and for others. And this sounds very basic and very simple, right? This idea of respect. And we often think we're respecting ourselves. We often think we're respecting other people. But it's really something that's not shown to us from a very early age, and continues to pervade culture, particularly again in the West. Most of us as children did not receive respect. We were treated as objects in some way. And this is not a class about bashing our parents, because the disrespect that they may have showed you has probably gone back for many generations in their own family. And it's become by and large a huge epidemic of modern man, modern families, and the way children are raised here. So what this disrespect creates is a deep feeling and a deep sense of unworthiness inside of us. And this unworthiness creates shame. And shame is a very tricky word. Shame is like the worst word. People cringe at this word. They think I'm talking about being kinky in bed, right? If you don't have shame, that means you're kinky in bed, or that you can walk around naked on the beach. You have no shame, because they think that having crazy sex and having the ability to really, have an expressive sense of who they are means having no shame, when in fact, often this behavior is a clear indication that shame is a huge barrier to their intimacy. In many cases, men who have so much shame, and they think if they find a sexual partner who's willing to accept all of these crazy things that they want in bed, that somehow this person will merge with them also on an emotional level and be able to create very deep sex. I see this a lot in the BDSM community, and I have no issue with BDSM. BDSM can be a form of very advanced healing, very advanced intimacy work, if it's done properly. But again, most people don't do it properly, or understand that it is not having a costume party or trying to prove something with how kinky you are. It is a way of deepening a certain level of intimacy. And typically it is used to have an experience with a stranger or nearly a stranger, or to try to spice up an otherwise broken relationship. And I talk about this more in my Dark Masculine, Dark Feminine workshop, which you can also find on A Love Revolution, and replay that for more about the Dark Masculine and that area of work. But tantrics were seen as very progressive and very open. There are no real rules in Tantra. There is a complete sense of freedom. We use pleasure and desire as guiding systems, unlike a lot of dogmatic religions and spiritual paths. We are non-dualistic. So what that means is there is no idea of heaven and hell or right and wrong. It's really about deep sense of having a self-responsibility. But there is one rule, and that one rule has to do with respect. We see ourselves and others as divine. We don't see ourselves as objects. We don't think that the body is something that is disposable. In fact, we believe our bodies are divine temples. And we believe in honoring each person's path, each person's body as a unique miracle. and is a gift that brings beauty and creation into the world. And we believe that no one is more important than another. We really recognize that there has never been, there will never be anyone else like you, living in your time, having your thoughts, creating what you've created, looking, sounding, being in this time and space. So this is sacred, and your life is sacred, your body is sacred, and every person you meet has that same level of sacredness, and that same level of gift, and is that same level of a miracle as you are. And living life through that knowing, in that experience, is where respect and miracles become an active part of our lives. And what a great way to live. What a great and free way to allow ourselves to merge with others, even if we don't like everyone or feel drawn to everyone. It's not saying that we have to like everyone or be drawn to everyone, but we have to respect everyone is a miracle and everyone is divine. And one of the things that I really love the most about my work, specifically about the concepts that I share, is that it's not an intellectual idea. Tantra is not something you study and become a master at through reading or through the brain. It is an embodied practice. It's a somatic practice, and it is an experience of miracles, really. And the way we get there can be quite polarizing, and it can be very triggering. And it's another part of it that I like, actually, because it can be very disruptive to the social order. And it's really about disrupting the conditioned mind and refocusing old energy and information and changing things up a bit and shaking the world up a little bit. And these methods break through BS and noise, and they help people see things through a new lens, or people just run away if they can't handle it. So that's fine too. And I in no way claim to be a master. So I also want to make that known. I'm on a mission to show people how to walk this path and to invite people to walk this path with me, because I found it has healed me on literally every level, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, energetically. It continues to heal me and guide me in so many ways, in so many depths of opening into who I am and into my feminine heart, which was at one time a very masculine heart, as so many women's hearts are. And these teachings that I bring are not mine. So I'm just a vessel for this wisdom, and it's an honor to do that. And I wish for these teachings and anything I can share to be of service to humanity and to my community. And it's really a privilege and an honor to have you all here. As I said, I feel lucky that I can have this unique perspective, and that my perspective can also be unique in that it's for men and for women. I work with both men and women. And I'm really looking forward to bringing these dynamics into our conversation today around shame, around Tantra, around intimacy, because we all carry it as men and women, but a bit differently. And we all carry masculine and feminine energy. And the practice of Tantra and releasing shame is not only about sexual shame, but in modern life, we go there when the word is brought up, coming back to this word of shame, right? And the reason that we go to sexual shame, I believe, is because sexual shame is the one that hits us the hardest. It's the one that we all have, and we carry it very deeply. And so I believe everyone has sexual trauma, even if you've never been molested, even if you've never had any abuse. I think particularly women, just because of the way our bodies are built and the society that we live in, most women are penetrated before we are ready. And most of us have sexual trauma because of the distorted ways that sexuality is revealed to us as children. Many of us find porn. Many of us have like an older sibling who gets it all wrong. Many of us feel that there is a winner and a loser in the game. Many of us haven't had it explained to us in a way that it is a beautiful sharing between people who love each other, and that it's a very special thing to share with someone. And so shame comes into sex for sure, but shame overall is really, a tactic and a game. It creates a game and personality traits and a hypnosis and a manipulation that makes us cover up our desire to be loved. And it creates a fear that we will be exposed for wanting love, which is, kind of so shocking and sad, right? That if we're exposed that we're behaving a certain way because we want to be loved, that there's shame in that. And really what we're afraid of having exposed is the belief that we're unlovable. And so shame is often used to keep us in line, to control other people. Shame is this dirty little secret that we're lying about ourselves, and we're lying to everyone about ourselves, whether it's pretending to be tougher than we are, whether it's pretending to like a corporate job that we hate, or trying to perform and make people laugh when we're sad inside, being people pleasers. There's thousands and thousands of ways that shame comes up. And it's basically a lie that we've had to tell to have our needs met. And we continue doing it as adults because it becomes an embedded habit and is part of our survival. And when we dive into these masculine and feminine energies in the shadow work, we're healing and confronting these parts of ourselves that feel weak or unlovable for us to embrace. What this path of Tantra brings is embracing the innocence of the love that we are seeking, and to not hide that, and to start awakening and creating the types of relationships, the types of lives, the types of narratives that we want to have in our lives, so that we can dig and use this digging into the pain and into the dirt that we all have, into the depths that we all have, to start to plant beautiful seeds and beautiful flowers where pleasure can bloom. And if we don't feel our pain and our shame, we don't feel our pleasure. And so that is something that was really a huge awakening for me. And this is why when men and women engage in this work, they can create the most powerful environments for growing intimacy, growing deeper pleasure and love, and healing each other consciously through holding space and calling in pleasure. And we're in such a time of great change right now. And I'd love to share some of the common blocks that I've seen and some of the challenges that I see most within this concept of intimacy, and how Tantra can be used as a form of really what I like to call a sacred psychology. And so I'm just going to go back to sharing my screen with you guys. The name of the book that I'm reading, LP, is Kindle My Heart by Guru Mai. I just recently bought it on Amazon, actually. So some ways that we can break through shame, which is such an important element of being more intimate, is by feeling our bodies and understanding what actually creates intimacy and what is actually our conditioned perception of intimacy. And so we went through some of those myths, right? I have no shame because I've had lots of sex. My body is just a vessel, when in fact it is a divine temple. And when we work with shame, we work with triggers and wounds and shadow work. And I also wanted to just add that some of the things that I may say may really trigger you. I recognize that a lot of the way that I may be speaking is not aligned with some of the cultural positions of gender neutrality, gender fluidity, the women's movement, and all types of things that have become very fashionable in the modern world. And it's my hope that you are here with an open mind, and that you are maybe even someone who feels that those things have gotten us into a place where we are not actually embodying our natural, most powerful selves. But I also want to invite you to be open, if this is a new perspective for you, to feeling this and flowing with it throughout this workshop. And, I don't need to force anything on you. You can end this workshop and go right back to feeling the way you feel about it. But a lot of what I'm talking about is an idea of natural polarity. And I really feel like we're in a time where men and women are taking the steps towards receiving and taking more responsibility and having more compassion and more unity with each other. And I believe that this is one of the keys, and letting go of some of these ideals that we have about what it means to be a modern woman and what it means to be a modern man, and looking at that and questioning that so that we can come together and be powerful manifestations of healing and change on the planet. And just to give you a little bit of an intro about me, I don't think I know all of you. I'm looking, and I'm certain that there are a lot of new names here, so it's lovely to meet you. I've been on a journey with this work for a long time. I spent the last 2 years living in ashrams and spiritual communities in Thailand. I was living there also with a guru, a tantra guru, and that experience was incredible. I'm a certified Kundalini and Tantra coach. I'm also an integrative health coach. My practices take from various modalities, including Taoist Tantra, Kundalini, traditional Tantra. I also use neuro-linguistic programming, Neo-Tantra, nonviolent communication, men's and women's work, shamanic work. And I grew up in New York as a child actor, and I also was a singer and songwriter. I founded and led a luxury-focused creative agency and led there as a creative strategist and creative director for 7 years, and created many hotel and restaurant and lifestyle luxury products that were launched internationally. And I'm just really dedicated to using my various background and my good fortune and my perceived challenges and the things that I've been through to being of service. And I work with men, women, and couples in these ways. And so just talking a little bit about the feminine. Feminine is receptive and masculine is in service. And we all carry this feminine and masculine energy. We all carry feminine and masculine wounds. And we've all been given wounds by our parents. Most men I see, when we talk a little bit about the work that I do, they don't recognize their mother as the source of their wounds, due typically to the belief that she must be saved from his father. So most men, not all, but most men identify more with their father being the villain and their mother being the one to save. And we'll get more into that. Women are best when we're in a state of feeling, and men are at their best when they're in a state of taking action. So men open their hearts, typically what I see, through their genitals, and women arrive at their sexuality through opening their heart first. And the biggest issues that I see is that men must move out of boy psychology, a boy mentality, and often are not initiated out of boy mentality into men mentality for a number of reasons, particularly that they don't have wise male elders to initiate them. And that is why I do men's circles, and that is why I call in other male experts, because I recognize that men really do need other men. And women must leave princess psychology to become fully women. And a lot of women don't like this observation, but there are many women, even women who are like, I'm a bad boss bitch and I'm going to be the CEO, are actually stuck in a princess, or I would even say like a very masculine, competitive mindset, or a very entitled mindset. And so we as women need to also be of service in the ways that we can. And I'm just going to go back to not sharing for a minute so that we can go a little further with this. So what do I mean when I talk about the differences between men and women? Because I do approach the way that I work with men and women quite differently. And, you know, honestly, while I was at the ashram was really the first time that I was called to hold a big retreat. And my guru, actually, his name is Bhagavan Sri Shamuka Anantanetha. I get this question a lot, and I can write it in the chat if you guys want to know his name and look him up. He has some wonderful videos on YouTube. But taking on a guru is very challenging because they are there to trigger you. They are there to tell you that you are going to become an adult. And they are not going to coddle you. They are not going to make you dependent on them in any way. And they want to liberate you into adulthood. And so they will deliberately do things that you do not like, that bother you, that you think are rude, to break your conditioning. And they will also put you in situations that they know will free you. And one of the things that he did that was very freeing for me was insisting that I teach a course. And in one of the segments of the course, I separated the men and the women, and they were doing an anger exercise. And I wanted the men to let out their anger on the other men. And I wanted the women to feel free to let out their anger with other women. And something came over me, and I felt that I needed to address the men. And it just sort of, my voice, things just started streaming, almost like a prayer or a song. And I started kind of crying out to the men and telling them to look at their brothers and to forgive their fathers and to come home to their women and to stop leaning on us for their spiritual and emotional support, but to look at each other and to forgive each other and to start trusting each other and to stop pleasing their mothers and to start coming home to women. And this just came out of me. And the men started crying. And one by one, they pulled me aside and were like, wow, please keep doing this work. And I just started feeling more and more called to working with men. And what it really meant was a lot more compassion for men. And my compassion and understanding started to increase. And the more I started feeling this welcoming and working with more men privately and in circle, I had women start reaching out to me in a very natural and organic way and wanting some feedback and direction and guidance in different parts of their lives, but mainly through how to build something with a successful man, with a partnership with a man, and to be and to be successful in conversations with men. And by successful, I mean, have their needs met. And that word successful, I've realized for women, is very much about feeling a connection, feeling him really being there with you, meeting you, supporting you as your feminine, and not treating you like a man. And many women ask, where are all the men? Where can I meet these men? Where can I find men who are willing to meet me where I'm at, who are doing the work, especially powerful women who are doing this work and living from a place where they want to take on bigger issues and as a collective. And really what separates the men from the boys here is wanting to be of service to something bigger and not needing the credit for it. Boys want to be heroes and save the day and get the trophy. And that's fun and sweet. But warriors know their blind spots. They surround themselves with a team, right? They surround themselves with trusted sources. They want to become kings. They have a vision of the kingdom they're building. And boys really remain like princes on a throne, complaining about how unfair life has been and taking credit for everything they do. And I would say most importantly, boys avoid responsibility for things that they've determined aren't their responsibility. And really, men lead and speak up, and they take a role and an initiative as a leader, even for things they're not responsible for directly. Whether they created a problem or not, men wish to protect and provide healing to the vulnerable. And when I work with men, I really encourage more communication, more verbal directives, giving challenges for them to overcome, helping them come to their own answers and conclusions with good questions, having them plan and having them journal. And like I said, calling in other men. And with women, it's a bit different. With women, it's more about really removing a lot of blocks and a lot of masculine places where they're stuck. Men, like I said, arrive to their hearts through their genitals, and women arrive through our hearts to open our spaces of our body. We need to feel that safety. And I started realizing that many women experience unsafety in their bodies because they've been so mishandled by men, and so mistreated by the masculine. And I would say, as I mentioned, most men are thinking that their fathers are the villains when it is their fathers are absent in some way, but the programming that they receive on an emotional level is from their mother's wounded, dysfunctional feminine energy. And whether that was the model that he's been dominated and controlled or spoiled and babied. He never, in fact, gets the cues on how to just do it himself, on how to just arrive himself, how he can go out there and just pick himself back up if he falls himself, and how he can realize that he doesn't need a mommy in every woman that he meets. And I see this a lot. And there's another book I'd love to talk to you guys about that really highlights this, because what I see a lot in this behavior with the mother wound is the wounded lover archetype. And so the wounded lover archetype is where a man either jumps from woman to woman, seeking out collections of muses, right? He's fully in love with a new woman every few months, or he swings in the other direction. Conversely, he shuts down emotionally and has no room for another woman in his life because his mother is so energetically tied to him. She is essentially energetically married to him, and he cannot hold space for another woman. You can read more about that in a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And it's by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. And with men, there's lots of mother stuff, which is often born from the father stuff. And so he can't trust men. He feels he needs to hide himself and please his mom. And if a man is not being shown good masculine directives, he fears expressing himself with women fully. And he attempts to hide himself, and still his needs need to be met. So he starts to kind of create this lie and manipulate and abuse in order to do that, because he hasn't been raised to trust his power. And power and pleasure are a really big part of the way the dynamic of masculine and feminine work, the way the dynamic of how intimacy can unfold is very much a part of how power and pleasure are used and misused in a dynamic between a man and a woman, in a man or a woman's individual dynamic with themselves, how they power and use pleasure with themselves. And I love this topic, and Mark English is going to get into this topic much more deeply in a couple of weeks on the 21st in a workshop here about using power and pleasure to increase male potency. And I love this idea, and I love talking about this because we are taught that power and pleasure are actually the exhaustions of these energies and not the preservations, the restorations, the cultivations of these energies, right? When we see someone who's powerful, typically on TV or something like that, we see what we see, like a wrestler jumping from some, building and crushing some other person and like completely exhausting themselves and putting themselves into a position where their bodies are totally spent. And the same goes with pleasure. When we think about pleasure, we have this shame around it almost, because we think of it as this abuse of pleasure, exhaustion of pleasure, of, losing sight of ourselves and overindulging, and not just having pleasure and understanding that so many things can be pleasurable. And so we tell little boys that their power is shameful, specifically their penis, specifically their metaphorical sword, right? We tell them they're bad and their swords create destruction, and that sex is taking from a woman. And the fact is, if we want masculine energy men on this planet, which we need masculine energy men on this planet, we need to allow men to feel powerful. We need men to completely embrace their power, to sink into their power, and to serve something as a focus of how they use that power, namely, and in Tantra, the protection of the feminine, the protection of innocence, the protection of nature, the protection and the service of beauty. And what is more criminal is women are here to show men their power, but we are told we are too dramatic or crazy when we express to men how their power affects us. I'm going to repeat that because I just want to see how that's hitting with women. You feel crazy when we tell men how their power affects us. Because really feeling and reflecting to a man how his power hits us in our bodies, how their power brings you pleasure, how their power brings you pain, is a sacred gift to offer to that man, if that man is an awakened man. And whether we're showing him how his power affects us through our orgasm, which is, of course, something that he longs to bring us to, or if his presence is healing and makes us feel safe. But sometimes a man's power can suffocate us. Sometimes a man's power can make us feel unsafe. And so this is the same way we also must be able to share in a way that we can be heard how his power hurts us when it does. But we are so terrified of being too much and have seen nothing other than a reflection of men typically that says, wow, that's too much, when we display our deepest pain and our deep expression. We don't open our throats and speak. We take it upon ourselves to think that there's something wrong with us, and we get angrier and angrier and more bitter and resentful. And what is happening collectively, what's happened individually in many women, is that we take on an attitude that says, okay, well, I'm just going to beat them at their own game then. So she shuts off her feelings like a man. She becomes more like a man because she believes that that is more powerful. And she shuts off her feelings, which are the most transformative parts of her. And so we have women who are no longer receptive, who are out of touch with our natures, with our hearts, with our bodies. We're not in sync with the earth. We're not in sync with our menstrual cycle. We shut that off too, right? And we get in our head. And on the other side, we see a man who's also locked in his head, trying to call in more status, trying to call in more praise, trying to call in more winning and being the best, just to feel a little ounce of what it means to be powerful. And what's the point of life where masculine and feminine and how far we've come, supposedly, has led us so far away from being true in our nature? And so I see women a lot operating too much in our masculine, and we feel it is our power, and we almost feel it is our duty to suppress a man's power and to emasculate him, because if he thinks he's too much, he's going to misuse that power, right? And we certainly have a lot of reasons to believe that, because men have definitely done a lot to destroy this planet. But if we're going to create intimacy, if we're going to create a new world, then this really is going to impact your ability as a woman to create an intimate connection with a man in order to receive the type of love and partnership you desire. Because a man requires a woman to trust and to surrender to his leadership. And I don't promote for any woman to just blindly trust a man who doesn't feel trustworthy to her. I completely am a supporter of building trust over time and allowing a man to show himself through his words and actions being aligned. And it takes integrity to create this surrender, man. When she feels he's got his shit together, and when she feels a sense that he can be present with her emotions without needing to fix her or without contracting, when he can see and show up for the type of connection that is of a higher order, we all evolve. And when he's doing his internal work, her internal work is really going into the numbness and thawing out that numbness so that she can express her feeling to him more deeply. And rarely do I see these days women who do not have extreme forms of numbness in their vaginas and in their bodies. And often women will tell men to fuck them harder. And it's because they can't feel anything. Because their internal trauma is living as a block in their genitalia. And so a big part of embodiment, a big part of intimacy is feeling everything. The pain that we have as women of comparing ourselves to other women, the pain we have of predatorial eyes on our bodies and hands on our bodies. Most women, as I mentioned, are not ready for sex before we have it, even from men we love. So we take in these things that we're not ready for, and our body goes numb. And through practices of Tantra, we return as women to being more powerful and receptive in our bodies so we can feel again. And we feel parts of ourselves that society tells us aren't sexy and that aren't good and that aren't feminine enough or whatever it is. And, I also want to address a little bit about the modalities that you choose to use in doing this self-work of feeling, because a lot of people in the mainstream have gotten very into a lot of intellectualized areas of quantum healing and of, when we talk about people like Eckhart Tolle and Andrew Huberman, Joe Dispenza, these guys are very scientific, and I think they can be great initiators of meditative practices. But the work that they do is not really encouraging heart and devotional aspects of masculinity and its service to the feminine, in my view, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. In Tantra, masculine energy exerting itself without consideration of the feminine is considered violence. And so when teachers forget the bhakti, or the devotional merging of the masculine and feminine in their teachings, we get a very sterilized and very laboratory, technical, and intellectual understanding of spiritual science that doesn't really bring us into a deeper essence of love. So for me, that has to be included in the conversation for the depth of transformation to happen. And it's dangerous because teachers take people and try to tell them to embody something through something that is actually not setting them up for a true transformation. So we need this more than ever, and accountability is going to be really a great way of having more receptivity between us as partners, and men being really aware of the numbness in your woman and understanding how a woman feels and how she's put together, not just the way that pornography and fashion shows us how a woman is put together, but energetically as a temple and as a portal to your truth as a man, to your truth as a reflection of your power. And so the way that she's being made love to, typically, is as though she's a dysfunctional man. And I don't want to sound harsh when I say that, but many women are being treated like they are men, whether it's a lack of foreplay, a lack of sensitivity, a lack of gentleness. She's being treated very heavy-handedly. And I want the men out there to understand this is part of why she goes numb. So men can really take note of this and begin to breathe and begin to feel into the tempo and into the rhythm of the woman, and to be slow and support her awakening. Women, you need to feel your own bodies, and so that you can create your own tempo and you can pleasure yourself and begin to feel yourself and throw away your vibrators, okay? Because those make you numb too. And so I really recommend breathing and dancing and singing as some of the most powerful practices, right? Dancing for opening up to your rhythm in your body, singing to connect your genitals to your pleasure centers, expressing your voice, expressing your feelings, allowing your body to really come back online. That's what we want. And with conscious men, I have not forgotten about you. This is a man who is practicing semen retention. And when I bring this topic up, a lot of men are like, you're going to take away my pleasure. You're going to take away my ejaculation. Honestly, this practice increases your sensitivity, increases your pleasure over time. And it just takes practice. And it's not like, it's not something that has to happen quickly, but it's a wonderful practice to start getting into at any age for multiple reasons, okay? Firstly, a man who can't control his sexual seed is a man who can be easily manipulated. Bottom line, this is going to make a man have more energy. It's going to make a man have more health, more presence. And in intimacy, you're going to be able to hold your woman in her pleasure for longer. And the more that you can hold her pleasure without ejaculating, the more you can go into deeper, full body orgasmic experiences, circulating the energy that's being conjured in her, the pleasure and the depth of pleasure that you're unlocking in her. And your mutual bodies, this sharing of this energy becomes a space for growth on so many levels. And when single men and single women are practicing in this way, I see this constantly. You don't need to be in a couple to practice Tantra, by the way. In fact, I highly recommend doing it alone. But you begin to attract people who are a better match for you. Not just in a physical sense, but in a vibratory sense, in an energetic sense. A man will see a woman when he has been practicing Tantra, and he will see a woman that he would normally be quite attracted to, and he will see that there is no one home. And he will appreciate her beauty, but he will not feel magnetized to have more. And he will not allow this divinity that's happening quite literally in his body, this miracle that's happening in his body, to be sidetracked. He knows that that's a game of suffering. He knows that it's fleeting, and he will not be attracted to that type of woman. So the embodiment piece is something that's really important to come back to. So for women, de-armoring her numbness, inviting in more feminine ways of speaking and being, working with our womb and our cervix, our breasts, cleansing our tissues, having orgasmic releases, balancing our menstrual cycles. That's the type of work I do with women. And with men, getting more into communication, biological differences. In my private couple sessions and in my courses, my couples courses, we explore more communication and compassion and sort of biology of the opposite energies of masculine and feminine. And we dive deeper into some intimacy practices in those more advanced classes. But a real key for men stepping into the best versions of themselves is working with really feeling their power, feeling this archetypal blueprint that they have around masculine and feminine, working with their prostate, working with their penis and their genitals, and connecting that area of their body to their hearts and to their voices, and encouraging mentoring with other men. Men really need to be seen from this awareness and really be shown by other men how he escapes, how he has arranged and set up his life in ways that are keeping him a boy and that don't support him or what he really wants to be in his community and in life. He kind of needs to see some of the mess that some of the things he does and believes have created. And this happens through the calling out of men from other men. And I certainly call out women to a degree as well. A lot of women are stuck in our boss bitch, modern woman mentality. And both of us need to see how we're distracted by some of these more adolescent ideas. And I get a lot of pleasure in seeing women come into how to be with a powerful man. And I want to really address something about this with women, because really, if you want to be in relationship with a powerful man, you have to really ask yourself, do you speak to men? Are you willing to speak to men as though they're powerful? Do you believe men are powerful? Are you willing to speak to a man as though you're speaking to a king? Can you really give that up? Can you give up the right that you have to emasculate a man? Can you agree to never tell a man how to do something or how to not do something unless he's asked you for that authority? If you want to connect with him, it's going to be important to be present and to be open and to avoid being some of these ways, because it will put him right back into childhood. And one of the reasons why women are more miserable now than they've ever been historically is because through these movements and feminist movements telling us we can do everything and we're expected that we should do everything, this is dangerous, because we have to take all of this on and we become more and more resentful, more and more pressured to do things that we never were intended for. And we have these Peter Pan men waiting in the sidelines with no role, no position in society, because women want to take all of those roles. And they've got their hands in their pockets chasing young girls to make them feel important for a few months, you know? And I'm not saying there isn't toxicity on all sides of this. And I'm not saying that it's not okay for a woman to have goals and to make her own money. And because I think it's beautiful and it's necessary that women own businesses and that women reach their goals, but not when it comes at the complete sacrifice of connection and partnership and good sex with a man. So these are some of the ways we can see these different dynamics happening and be able to hold space to rise and to shift our self-awareness from triggers and wounds and patterns, and not to shame the other for where we are on our journeys. These practices of Tantra really help us cut through some of these boundaries slowly and gently. And when we can arrive back at our bodies, we're really arriving into a place where healing starts from. And we heal our relationships with our mothers and our fathers and our past lovers. And we start showing up in our authentic power as adults. We start to see the world as something that we create And in the realm of relationships on this planet, we start to rise and uplift each other through the lens of love. And we start to transmute and alchemize pain into pleasure. And we need to make each other safe. We need to make each other safe to release these patterns and this shame. And this will come when men have their eyes opened and focused on their consciousness and on their power and how they use their power. And when women can see men as safe and take on our roles as feelers and oracles to express in ways that he can hear with love. This way of speaking then really becomes very much a dialogue that is spoken of in the Bhagavad Gita between Shiva and Shakti. This exchange really shifts at a cosmic level, the universal consciousness, the ecstaticness, the orgasmicness, and the pleasure, and uses compassion as an engine to fuel the love and the change and express this beautiful feeling that comes from our hearts. So we come back to our bodies, we balance our nervous system, and we listen to each other through this lens of love. And I have just a few more notes to share with you guys. I'll share my screen again. I feel so long-winded right now. Thank you for being here and sitting through all of this. Let me find my presentation. And so more concretely, what intimacy can look like for the masculine. If you feel that you are feminized or you believe that the masculine is feminized, oftentimes masculine is feminized, or they are acting out as boys, or they have taken on their mother's personality, their mother's feminine, rather than cultivating their own feminine. And when a man takes on his mother's feminine, it's because he didn't know how to cultivate a safe space for his own masculine, because he didn't have a role model to show him how to create safety as a masculine, to then have his own feminine be birthed. And that's another very complicated concept that I discuss in my men's circle, and we're launching that digital version in a couple of weeks. If you're interested, sign up for the newsletter and you'll get all of the updates on everything that's coming out. But the way a woman can conjure intimacy for the masculine is tell him your feelings, surrender to his lead. Don't control him. If you don't like his lead, tell him, not while he's leading, not when you're angry. Choose a time and ask him if it's convenient to have a conversation, and do not spring emotional or deep topics onto him out of nowhere. Create sacred time to have these conversations. Do not have an attitude that he needs to fix something. Simply share how you feel and how it would feel to not have that issue present between you, and allow him to come to his own conclusion. Voice your pleasure, moan and respond to what you like. Men also need compliments, and be gentle, physically be gentle with his prostate. And that's also something that we talk about in the more advanced classes, discussing his comfort with prostate exploration and prostate orgasming. Many men haven't had that, or they feel a certain weirdness about it, oftentimes totally normal. So if that's something you're ready to explore it in a very intimate way and very gentle way. Men, how you can come into your masculinity and your intimacy more is declare your mission and do it. Voice your emotions to men and not always to your woman. Men are very confused about this topic of expressing your emotions. And oftentimes men don't understand that context is really important to how a woman wants to hear you being emotional. And so if you're ever curious or wondering if it's a good time to share your emotions, I would ask this question before sharing something with a woman that's highly emotional. Is what you're about to share going to make her feel closer to you? Is what you're about to share going to bring her in to your heart and invite you into her heart? Or is what you're going to share emotionally going to repel her or show a vulnerability that she has to then be responsible for caring for you because of? So if it is something that's going to bring her into your heart and make you guys closer, that's a great time to share emotion. Play and engage in activities that you love. Have mentors, have male mentors and men's groups. Do men's work. Be in community with other men who hold you accountable and who talk to you about deeper things than just fishing or drinking beers or playing video games or whatever it is. That a lot of men's relationships are quite surface. Have relationships that go deep. And do not entertain women who emasculate you. Just, as a rule of thumb, allow yourself to be around women who want to communicate for your highest self. And practice semen retention. This is a really beautiful practice for you on so many levels, men. And intimacy for the women. Women are in a much more masculinized energetic state than we've ever been, and men can help disarm us with very powerful and safe energy holding. So open our hearts. Help us open our hearts. I mentioned, sharing a vulnerability that's going to bring her closer. Allowing her to communicate honestly to you without being defensive about it. Allow her to open her throat, allow her to speak, and don't have a position of trying to fix whatever she's saying or to give a solution. I use this term that Alison Armstrong coined as holding the trash, right? So hold the trash and let her and get excited about holding the trash, just like, you want me to hold the trash? What else have you got? Because women, when we can just let things off of our chest and just get it out, it's like the most freeing thing. The way that we need to get things out is the same way that men often need to go off and be on their own to figure out a problem. So if you can relate to that as a man, understand that the woman's version of that is actually expressing ourselves, not going and being alone. Take the lead and have a plan when you take the lead. Super sexy. Great way to get her to feel safe. And also open her body. Understand how to open her body. Massage her. Be very gentle with her clitoris. Be very gentle with her body in general. I would say most men are too fast and too heavy-handed. And women, how we can inspire intimacy in men is allow yourself to feel and express that feeling. Use yoga and other techniques to release trauma from your body. Other techniques I would recommend is yoni eggs, yoni steaming, tracking your cycle, yoga nidra, dancing and singing. All of these are part of my women's course, and that's going to go digital in a few weeks as well. So sign up for the newsletter if you'd like more information on that. Speaking in a feminine tone, speaking in a way that really feels soft to you, speaking to yourself that way. And don't entertain men who make you feel you need to be masculine. Don't be with men who you feel you need to emasculate, because that man is putting you in a feeling of being unsafe, and you will ignite your masculinity to fill in that gap between the two of you, and you won't be honoring your truth, and you won't be protecting your sacred feminine temple, which is divine and must be sacred at all times. So trust that feeling. And men, a few ways to open her: adore her in all of her way, her essence, her energy, her taste, her smell. Go down on her. Fuck her, heal her, take away her demons, penetrate her fears, penetrate her heart. Use your cock like a divine key to unlock all of these deep, beautiful parts of her. Bring yourself into dominance with presence, okay? Be present. So many men have so many things on their mind and they're running around the room. Be present with her. And I don't mean you need to eye gaze 24 hours a day, but really letting her know you're there feels so good. And she will surrender into that power. Communicate with her. Be in your body. Try to drop out of your head. Give yourself time to transition from task to task. I say this a lot. We all have these transition times when we're leaving the house, or when we're coming back from the house, or when we're going from a work situation into a social situation. These are things that aren't talked about a lot, is transition. Allowing for transition creates intimacy, in that you're not taking it personally that someone is not thinking about you in that moment because they're on their way to work or they just got home from work. Ask your partner what they need during their transitions. It's such a huge game changer, because you don't feel like someone's being mean to you just because they're about to leave the house to go do something. You just see that they're in a transition. And so understanding what you need, what your transitions are, and communicating that. Holding space that is strong no matter what comes up. Listen to a woman's testing. If a woman is unsatisfied with you, and she is not a woman who's constantly dramatic and immature or whatever it is, then that is a woman who is giving you a clue to how you can be living to your edge and improving your potency in the world. Trust her voice, trust her oracle, but don't go into a people-pleasing mode with her. She's not your mommy to please. Create safety and open your heart fully. Start letting your guard down. Embrace sides of yourself, even the shameful sides. Don't hide. Stay in discomfort without running. And reparent yourself in the areas that you feel you need to be reparented. Be your own father. Forgive your father. Be your own mother. Cut the cord to any codependency you may have with your mother. And just to share a little statistic, male ejaculation scatters 2 to 500 million sperm cells. And so this is just a look at your age group, how many times you should be ejaculating per week, generally speaking. And so as you can see, as we go down in age, we need more of that. And as we go up in age, we need less. So thank you all so much. We've gone a little bit over, but I was expecting that was going to happen. I hope you're still with me, and I hope that you've gotten a lot out of this. I'm going to see if any questions have come up, or if you have any questions, now is a great time to write them down. And if not, thank you for being here. I'll give us another couple of minutes, but thank you so much for being here. And if you'd like to be part of this community, if you haven't already signed up, it would be such a pleasure to have you join. If you'd like to learn more about this, I am doing a retreat in Costa Rica, and we will be having an early bird sign up. So please do sign up for our newsletter. I'll give you the link. Share it with your loved ones. If you're not already a member, do get on our mailing list, because I will be announcing that retreat actually tomorrow, and I'm so excited. Costa Rica has just been such a beautiful, magical place for me. Being able to be part of that community and to be embraced by the community there has been fantastic. So many great teachers, and it's such a wonderful environment for healing. It reminds me a lot of Thailand. So you can click this link. That link will bring you to the Mighty Network and to the Love Revolution platform. Sending you guys so much love, infinite wisdom and light with you all. And I look forward to our next coming together. Satnam.